Which players are set to go off in week 8 and help you win your fantasy matchups? Welcome back, Endgame community. I'm Pierre, he's Chris. We're here as always to give you our weekly boom picks to let you know who we think should be in your lineups, might put up some big points for you. Chris, start me off with your first boom pick.
You know, I really did not think I would be talking about Raheem Mostert in week 8 of the 2022 season, but here we are. He looks great. He looks explosive. He's still got juice. He's still got burst. It doesn't matter. Like, he's over 30 years old. He should be wearing down by now. He's never really been a durable guy, but he's staying healthy. He looks fast. He looks explosive. Just came off a great game against a bad Steelers run defense. So, yeah, I shouldn't be too surprised about that. But now he should have another great game because he gets an even worse run defense, and that is the Lions, who just made Ezekiel Elliott look like Ezekiel Elliott from 5 years ago. Maybe not on the ground, but scoring touchdowns and things. I don't see how Raheem Mostert can't do even better than he did in week 7 against this defense. And look, the Lions offense is sputtering right now. They look terrible. We don't know if St. Brown is going to be out there or not. And even if he is, we don't know if it's going to matter because this offense looks as bad as we thought this offense would be. They're not going to force the Dolphins to have to abandon the running game. They're going to be able to run the ball. They're going to be able to control the game. Mostert should get a ton of touches. Chase Edmonds barely involved. So Raheem Mostert, if you've got him, you have to start him this week. He's in line for another huge game.
I agree. Look, I hope they keep it going. Dolphins offense, at least the run game, has been very consistently good. Now, you did mention Mostert. As far as last week looked good, broke off some big runs against the Steelers. Well, why not go against that defense again? I like Miles Sanders this week against the Steelers. Got a home game. You know they're going to be favored pretty heavily. Look, that Pittsburgh offense just will not challenge that Philly defense. At least they shouldn't. You think game script would be in their favor. You think they'd be able to establish the run and run the ball quite a bit. And so that works obviously in the favor of Sanders. Should get a big workload. And look, Sanders is a guy you never really know what to expect, right? I mean, he's kind of either going to have a big game or an okay game, but he's been a lot better than last year. Last year, I mean, there was a lot of disappointment, at times. This year, obviously, there's nothing disappointing about that Philadelphia offense. Again, the game script will be in his favor, and that defense is nothing to be scared about. If you saw how effective Mostert was at times, on Sunday night, I think Miles Sanders can be at least as good, if not better. Definitely a good chance for a touchdown. So I like Sanders this week. He's always kind of a borderline start, but I feel like this week he's a must start. All right, Chris, give me another boom pick that you have.
Well, you just mentioned Miles Sanders against the Steelers defense. I love Devonta Smith this week against the Steelers defense. Not a good secondary at all. Gives up a ton of yards to wide receivers. In fact, they're giving up the most fantasy points to wide receivers. And obviously, A.J. Brown, he's a stud. But I don't think people realize how much of a stud Devonta Smith has been this year. 4 games with over 15 PPR points. And if you take out, that week 1 where the Eagles were showing off their shiny new toy, A.J. Brown, when he had that 0, he's been good pretty much every single week for you. Has a ton of upside, and he's going to have a ton of upside again this week because this Steelers defense, this Steelers secondary, not only are they bad, but they're decimated by injury. They don't have anybody that can cover Devonta Smith or stop Devonta Smith. He's getting a healthy target share. He has tons of upside once again in this matchup. And people still consider Devonta Smith as kind of this fringy, like, should I start him? Should I not start him? Start Devonta Smith every single week. He's great, and he's in a great spot this week. Please, don't worry about it. Don't, fret over it. Just put him in your lineup and be happy with all the fantasy points you get in week 8.
Yeah, I mean, really, it was like you said, that week 1 where they didn't really make a point to throw to him because they wanted to show off A.J. Brown. And then that one cold weather game where he just wasn't having it. He didn't want to be there, but Devonta Smith has been great most weeks. Definitely a good spot for him. Now, we've only seen 1 week of DeAndre Hopkins this year, but it was a pretty good one. He was a target hog, and that makes sense because Marquise Brown now out for a while. It's still the case. It's going to be a lot of DeAndre Hopkins. And why wouldn't it be? He's a stud. Look, maybe he's not what he used to be in Houston. I wouldn't say he's in his prime, but he's still a really good receiver. And he's still on a team that's going to need to pass the ball a lot because they're not great at running the ball or playing defense. So I think that Hopkins not only is going to be a guy that is going to get a lot of targets, he's going to do a lot more with them this week because, last week got a ton of catches, but it's not like it was a mega yardage game. Well, he's going against the Vikings defense that gives up the most yards per target, 9.4 out of any defense. You know what? This is a game that you would think on paper could be a shootout. Minnesota at home, against that Arizona defense, they could put up points. Arizona might have to come back. You never know how these things go, but I feel good not only about Hopkins getting a lot of targets, but also doing a lot with them. So, you know what? He's a must start for me, but also I feel like he could go back to vintage Nuck and have a top 10 finish in terms of wide receivers for fantasy this week. All right, and then one more boom pick. Chris, I feel like you have a special one in store for us.
Yeah, this is going to probably be the most shocking pick in the history of Fantasy Endgame. But I'm going to say that DJ Moore is going to boom in Week 8. I can't believe I'm saying it, but DJ Moore is going to boom in Week 8. And look, he kind of boomed in Week 7, which I did not expect at all with PJ Walker under center. Going up against the Bucs, I was like, do not start DJ Moore in Week 7, and he boomed. But this week, he gets the Falcons, who just gave up, 400-plus yards to the Bengals. Tyler Boyd had a huge touchdown. Chase had 2 huge touchdowns. Higgins had a huge game. And their one good corner, A.J. Terrell, left that game with an injury. We don't know his status, but he's not going to be close to 100%. At least P.J. Walker targets DJ Moore, and the passes are somewhat catchable most of the time. So in this matchup against this secondary that can't stop anybody, I think it's going to be another big DJ Moore game. So for the first time in the history of Fantasy Endgame, I am going to say that DJ Moore will boom in Week 8, and you have to start him.
And look, I'm not going to let you forget this. This past week, I almost picked DJ Moore as a boom, and I think you talked me out of it, and then sure enough, he scored. So look, why not keep it going? I agree with you. DJ Moore, you got to put him in your lineup. And here's a guy you probably didn't think was going to be in your lineups, but Darius Slayton, again, a guy I feel like I have some remorse here. I almost streamed him this week against Jacksonville, and I didn't because I thought, I don't know about the target share. I just don't know if he's going to be involved enough. Maybe it's a little too desperate. It wasn't. He scored again. And you know what's interesting? I also just discovered, did you know this? Darius Slayton was in the doghouse for some reason. Didn't know that. Well, apparently he's out of it now because they talked about how, Coach Brian Daboll wasn't super impressed in the preseason. They got all these other players. Well, look who else is in the doghouse. Kadarius Toney, Kenny Golladay. These guys are on the trading block. These guys aren't playing, even if they're supposedly healthy or not. Who knows? I don't think that's even it. But Darius Slayton has apparently worked his way back into Daboll's favorite, and look what has happened. He's become a factor. And look, I've been talking about Wan'Dale Robinson. I know he's a guy I like. I think could be the number 1 receiver in this team, but he keeps getting banged up. Again, even last week, left with a knee injury. So Darius Slayton seems to be the most reliable, consistent guy here in this offense, and he's a big play threat. We saw that back since his rookie year. He doesn't need a ton of targets, but I think he might even get a ton of targets this week against the Seattle secondary that, look, has not been great. Last week, they did fine, but that's because Mike Williams got hurt during that game. Keenan Allen is not 100%. Josh Palmer didn't play. Their play caller for the Chargers, Joe Lombardi, doesn't know what he's doing. There's a lot of reasons why that Seattle secondary didn't get eviscerated last week when they should have. But my point is this is a good matchup for Slayton. He could be the number 1 guy for the Giants, and I think he is a sneaky start that could boom once again. All right, now you know which players we feel good about in Week 8. What about the guys that are must starts or sits? Well, we got you covered. Check out our Week 8 playlist for everything you need to set those winning lineups.